My name is Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And today we'll be talking about Polish master
Jerzy Skolimowski.
I threw to Will because I didn't want to butcher his name right off the top. We have a whole episode for me to do that.
And it's very possible I butchered his name off the top.
Did we watch a bunch of videos, including making-ofs, where actors that he worked with said his name? We did. We tried our best.
Listen, it wouldn't be this podcast if we weren't butchering a foreign name. But hey, at least we try.
And this is a director I've always been interested in because of his prolific, very odd career that, to my eyes, has always seemed to play a little bit in the shadows, that you never hear people kind of highlight him that often.
And some of you may have also seen the film that he co-wrote in 1962, Roman Polanski's debut, Knife in the Water, as well as Andrzej Wajda's Innocent Sorcerers in 1960, his first film credit of any kind. But it's true that between those movies and EO, a lot of the movies exist kind of at the edge of the canon, you know?
And I think that there is a power that a lot of his English language considered best films were difficult to get for a while. Because I remember looking for Deep End or The Shout, and they were like, well, it's not available, like, it's not on DVD. This was many years ago. It's changed since then. But I do think there was a mystique there.
Well, yeah, they can be difficult to, his career can be difficult to place because he's a Polish filmmaker who sprang out of the Polish New Wave in the early 1960s, but has spent most of his career abroad, particularly in England. So he's difficult to place in a national context, and that displaced quality is also, you know, part of the mood of his films. You know, he never rose to the sort of superstardom that, say, Roman Polanski did. He is also, of course, a painter, a musician, a writer, a poet, an actor, and formerly a boxer.
Yeah, like, if you look at his career, in the 1990s, he made a movie that he had such a miserable experience on. He went, I don't want to make movies anymore unless it's something personal. So he didn't do another one until 2008.
As with his old friend Roman Polanski, his childhood was shattered by the Second World War. His house in Warsaw was bombed, and he was literally dragged out of the rubble. His father was killed by the Nazis. He was in the Polish resistance, and his mother, I read today, housed a Polish Jewish family in the attic. He went to boarding school as a child, and as I said earlier, spent much of his career working abroad, not in communist Poland. So I would say that much like Polanski, that sense of dislocation and displacement and a sort of confusion of identity permeates these films.
But I also think that, you know, it's definitely from a Polish perspective that if he has spent a lot of time away, he's searching for it in his films, trying to understand it in a way. And he is a filmmaker that early on he went to a film school. He worked with Andrzej Wajda writing one of his films, and that when he started directing films himself, he made them all about himself. He was like the ultimate, like, hey, I'm in my 20s. I'm going to be directing films. I will also star in them, and they're going to be a little bit pretentious, very show-offy, like the one that I watched, Walkover, for this.
I watched it too this morning. Yeah, he stars in it as a 29-year-old kind of layabout, well, layabout's the wrong word.
Womanizer / boxer.
A drifter, you know? He's going from town to town and gets off in one small Polish town just because he sees a former classmate there, you know, a beautiful young woman. And she's on her way to this plant where she's working as an engineer, and he follows her around and they form a sort of connection. Much of the impact of the film, though, is, you know, it's shot in black and white, and it's set against this backdrop of, you know, Poland under communism, which honestly doesn't look that different from America under capitalism. You know, lots of people grifting and barely surviving.
This movie, when I was watching it, it felt like a lighter version of the cinema of Alexei German, the director of Hard to Be a God. I don't know if you've ever seen his films. He does like long tracking shots, lots of visual information, and like that surrealism that permeates this. Like, Walkover, at certain times you're like, is this really happening? Is this like more of a stream of thought kind of movie?
Yeah, and I mean, the way that the camera moves in Walkover, it doesn't always seem like connected to the action per se. It seems to have, you know, in most movies, the camera work and the editing is supposed to be invisible, but the camera in this movie
show-offy.
Yeah, it's always like drifting around, and it seems to have a mind of its own. And it sets, I would also say, just the very movement of it, along with the black and white cinematography, sets a sort of like melancholic, maybe even like dystopian vibe for the spaces that they're in.
When I read that this film is like 29-ish shots and that it starts with like, oh, you're seeing this, but then you're not. That's just a reflection in windows to interconnect it into a longer shot. I'm like, yes, I know what kind of filmmaker this is. It's the kind of like film student, has something to say, maybe perhaps a little bit self-involved, but this is a director that did it. And it's kind of like mesmerizing to watch play out.
I mean, I have heard him described as like the cross between Polanski and Francois Truffaut.
That makes a lot of sense. And like after Walk Hour and a bunch of films around that time, you had another one, Barriera and Rhysopis. Most of them like he starred in, and they were very personal, autobiographical tinge films. Like the next one he made, Le Départ, was like his French New Wave film. It even starred Jean-Pierre Léaud. And it's like you can see a filmmaker trying to figure out, all right, what is my career going to be? Like Roman Polanski very clearly made a kind of American transition, and that's where he did most of his work through funding from there.
Well, one thing that I think, Skolimowski's best known films have in common with Polanski's is that slow burn, like I'm slowly going crazy atmosphere that they have.
A kind of, you feel constricted watching it. The walls are closing in.
And a kind of Nicholas Roeg quality too, where it feels like, you're like sanity itself. Like the walls aren't just closing in, but they're like dissolving. And what even are the walls anymore?
And a lot of his films, like Deep End, it starts and you think you know what it's going to be until it like swerves into, yes, this is what we set up, but we're taking it to the extremes of where it can go. Basically like how it would probably play out in real life.
So Deep End from 1970, which I loved and is my favorite of the ones that we watched for this episode. Most of the film, well, this one takes place in swinging London. It's in bright, vibrant color.
But we should point out, it's a very British film that mostly shot in Munich.
Yeah, and by a Polish director who survived the Second World War, which I think all contribute something to its absolutely disorienting atmosphere. Most of the film takes place in and around a bathhouse and swimming pool facility where the protagonist works. And the protagonist is a 15-year-old disaffected boy named Mike. And the opening interview scene, I don't know if sets the tone is the right phrase, but like it sets something because he shoots it in such a disorienting way. Like sirens are going off. The editing is really rapid. He doesn't quite, the opening credits too, like take place with these like really close up shots over what looks like flesh. Then you find out it's like a bicycle.
But then you get a Cat Stevens song playing in the background, which sets like, yes, it's like a nice, comforting mood. Oh, I know what kind of mood. This will be a Harold and Maude, if you will, even though that movie actually came out after this one.
But anyway, his coworker, this 15-year-old boy, Mike's coworker, is Susan, who's 25, and she trains him in the job. And they have an odd relationship. Before you can say licorice pizza, he's obsessed with her. And their dynamic is, she doesn't exactly discourage it.
No.
She goes back and forth between being cold and flirtatious. But she has a fiancé who is wealthy and kind of sleazy.
And she also is having an affair with a gym teacher. So there's these two things going on. And then Mike's obsession with this, let's use a modern description, manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah, and also worth noting, can't believe I forgot to say that the bathhouse itself is a very toxic environment where the boy, who's 15, is more or less expected to do light sexual favors for the clientele, who are mostly older women. Like, they'll constantly be calling him into their change room to like...
Well, one of them, played by Diana Dore, was like an infamous bombshell in movies of the 50s. So there's like a satirical angle on having her be the one take Mike and basically sexually assault him, getting off by rubbing his body over hers against his will.
Yeah, and there's something about the visual and oral style of the film where it's like simultaneously abrasive and like warm and inviting.
Yeah, well, all the walls of the film are painted in very bright colors. Like, there's even a joke at one point that you see one of the walls being painted red as there's like an emotional thing happening in the foreground. But it's the way it's shot as well, that it's shot really like from the hip, handheld, that all of these bright kind of things you would associate today with a Wes Anderson film are grungy, and you feel like you're in them as you're taking this kind of like dark journey into the teenage male psyche.
Yeah, and I mean, I've rarely seen a movie that is so kind of accurate and evocative about like what a 15-year-old boy sort of coming of age is actually like.
Like, he doesn't understand what's going on, and he's chasing it and taking it to extremes that you're like, what are you doing?
And like, you know, he's being groomed, to use the parlance of our times. He's being horribly abused by this workplace, and also he like kind of likes it and is sort of confused by it, and he's also not a very good guy.
No. Well, the world revolves around him, and like he asks a lot like, well, how could you do this? How could you do this to me? And it's like, oh my god, or you're not this kind of person.
Well, exactly. I mean, so getting a little bit into spoiler territory here, and I do encourage people to pause the tape and go and see the movie. But you know, he starts like disrupting her dates. He starts
stalking her,
following her around, and I don't even know if he knows what his end game is, but he's following her around, and this leads him on a journey through the sordid sexual underbelly of London. You know, he sees a sex worker who basically offers herself up to him for free, and he doesn't take it because he's too loyal to her. You know, he's looking at, you know, the girly shows.
A horny 15-year-old.
I think he would have found a way. But he finds a life-size advertisement for her, the girl of his dreams, you know, outside a striptease club. And he says to her, this can't possibly be you. It can't possibly be you. She says, well, I don't know. Is it? Sure looks like me, you know? And then the last act of the movie is this
extended.
I mean, it's
like 20 minutes long, and it actually started the idea for the film, which is, what if, you know, you had to find something in snow and you had to melt all the snow to get there, which is what you see them do step by step by step.
Yeah. And the impact of it is like a siren going off in your brain.
So I've seen a lot of people talk about that, like, while the film stars Mike, it's really Susan's story, played by Jane Asher, and she goes through like, it would have been easy for this film to be like, she's like the femme fatale, like pointing all of these men to fight amongst themselves. But there's so much vulnerability there.
She's confused too. And like the fact that she sort of at sometimes entertains his advances and then at other times scorns them, I think it's like pretty realistic.
And she has like this long kind of screed against the adult man that's in a relationship with her that really kind of brings her emotional journey to the forefront and puts the center on her, that I found so great in this movie, especially where it ends up, which I think most reviews, like, they talk about how it ends because that's like the focal point, but don't ruin it for yourselves because it is genuinely like, oh, okay. And I think that's where the director said, like, how do you reach this point? Like, how do you get here? And when you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, that's how that happens. If these kind of feelings and acts are played upon the way that every crappy 15-year-old boy thinks, this is where you go.
Did you watch The Shout from 1978?
I did watch The Shout, because that's the other one that when people talk about this filmmaker, they always bring up The Shout.
A very unsettling movie. So it's
Would you be shocked to hear that the producer wanted Nick Rogue to direct it?
Yeah, well, it feels exactly like that, doesn't it? So it's about a young couple who live out in the country, played by Susanna York and a young John Hurt, and a mysterious stranger, played by Alan Bates, shows up at their place. And he's lived in the Australian outback for a long time. He had a wife who was an Aboriginal. In fact, John Hurt at one point jokes, you're in the outback. Did you marry an Aboriginal? And he says, yes, I did. And I had children and I murdered them because the only thing that the Aboriginals understand is murder. And so that sets a bit of an odd tone for his visit there. And what happens for the rest of the movie, I mean, describing the plot is a little beside the point.
But you even didn't mention that this film is being told by the villain of the story.
To a young Tim Curry.
So you're like, wait, is this true? Is it not?
And it's being told at a mental health institution, an asylum, to use the less politically correct terminology, where the John Hurt character is being held.
And so I was like watching this movie going, boy, people really had like, the mysterious white man who knows Aboriginal mysticism. And because like The Last Wave had come out the year before, the Peter Weir film that has like a similar plot. But I looked, and the original short story is by Robert Graves from the 20s, and it does have that Aboriginal kind of like, oh, this white guy goes and knows this stuff and then brings it to an unsuspecting couple.
Right, because in this movie, you know, the Alan Bates character, he's learned from an Aboriginal shaman the secret to a kind of shout, the titular shout that if you hear it will kill you.
But that's not what really the movie is about, though.
Well, the movie is really more something like, yeah, kind of like if Nicholas Roeg directed Knife in the Water. This sort of like strange triangle that plays out between this couple and this man.
And the shout is almost not that important. It could be anything. Like, and it's really about like spirit and just being a weak man. I get like Knife in the Water, basically. Yeah. And it's such a odd film, but it's also one that's like grounded in very interesting ways to make it feel normal without, you know, I love Nick Roeg, but like a lot of his films are very odd, like they're disconnected. And it seems like here, everything is trying to play almost like, oh yeah, this is an everyday with these weird elements that starts to kind of take over the film by the end.
Moonlighting from 1982. I mean, I really love this one too. This one stars Jeremy Irons. It's set in London, but takes place against the backdrop of political unrest in Poland, specifically the trade union protests of the early 1980s. During this period, martial law was actually imposed in Poland to crush the unions. I believe, I mean, I don't know a lot about this, but food prices were raised while wages were stagnant.
It was very bad in Poland.
And the unions actually had significant financial support from the West during this. Reading the Wikipedia page that following Poland's transition to liberal capitalism, the union's membership declined substantially, and by 2010 it had lost 90% of its original membership. So capitalism was not good for the union. So the main character is Noak, played by Jeremy Irons, who is an electrician from Warsaw who lands in London to lead a small team of workers who are renovating a house. The owner of the house is a wealthy government official, but the renovation is happening under the table, so to speak.
And I think something important about this film is that it was made in a rush by the director reacting to what was going on in Poland. Like, supposedly he put this together in a couple of weeks, shot it in a couple of weeks, and that, like, other than Jeremy Irons, like, the three men that are helping to build the house are, like, workers that the director knew and was working on his house to play those roles.
So Jeremy Irons, the Jeremy Irons character, is the only one of the four workers total who can speak English.
And you're seeing everything from his perspective. Like, all of his thoughts are, like, whispered to the audience on screen, sometimes indecipherably because it's like so low in the mix.
So all of them are, you know, strangers in a strange land here, but he's the only one who can communicate with the outside world, and he's the only one who has knowledge of the political situation in Poland at the time, which he keeps from the other workers.
Yeah, because he doesn't want them wanting to return home and not finish the job, which is this prison that they've thrown themselves in.
Meanwhile, all of them are sort of agog at, you know, this capitalist world that they're in, you know.
Availability of food when you walk into a grocery store.
All of these consumer goods. But nevertheless, money runs out as the film goes on. And as the film goes on, I would say the capitalist West increasingly looks like, you know,
terrible place.
Yes. Like, you know, there's a recurring thing of the local convenience store where, you know, they're so vigilant looking for shoplifters to the point where, like, they're like the Stasi or something, where it's like, you know, like, we see that you're in the store all the time, but you never spend all that much money. What's that about? Oh, you ride a bike here. Can we investigate the bike?
You're not from here, eh? Well, I may have a few questions.
Very interesting.
And it is a movie that just like crushes the viewer as it goes along. Jeremy Irons, not Polish, it should be pointed out.
No, but yeah, I mean, the atmosphere of London in this movie is actually, to me, not entirely unlike the atmosphere of Berlin in Possession.
Yeah,
it's just like,
exactly.
It's just like
heavy.
It squeezes you.
Yeah. And, you know, Thatcherism is coming into play here.
Thatcherism, the old,
the old war horse herself.
Yeah.
Rest in piss. And so you can feel that is very evident as well. You know, this film, like where it ends, it leaves you so hanging and miserable that it like burrows into you. That like you watch this guy, and as he's doing it, not telling the men, you wonder like, why is he doing this? Like, what is the end goal other than this is all he knows? So he wants to continue it until there's that end point and he cannot keep going.
Well, also there's a bit of a question of like the amount of power that you have in a completely powerless situation.
Yes. And like he likes having that power when everything else is out of his control.
They are strangers in a strange land. And then then, like he's shoplifting at the convenience store and he starts doing it out of necessity. But at a certain point,
a little bit of a thrill that you can get away with it.
Kind of gets off on it. He has a little bit of power.
And we're trying to say, if you can shoplift, get away with it, do it.
Yes, but you will get caught.
You will get caught eventually and punished. Yes. So what we're saying is, get a good job, pay all your bills, and you'll have a good life in this capitalist society.
Here's what I'll say. It's easy to shoplift until all of a sudden it isn't anymore.
Yes. Will speaking from experience. Have you ever shoplifted anything, Will?
I've done it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No,
I think the statute of limitations is over.
I'm too much of a good boy. Yeah. I once got caught opening...
Not lately, I hasten to add.
I once opened a magazine as a kid because I wanted to see what was inside, like the plastic bag. And the guy caught me and he was like, "Did you just open that?" And I went like, "No." He's like, "Then who opened it?" And I was like, "It wasn't me."
And then he said, "Why are you looking at that pornography?"
No, it wasn't pornography. It was probably like a video game magazine or something like that.
Well, a likely story.
To which I say, why is this teenager yelling at me? What is he getting out of this other than being a cog in the system?
If I worked at some grocery store, I'd
be like, I don't care. Yeah. I mean, if it was the owner, sure. Okay. But it wasn't. It was just some guy. So he has made many movies after this, but... Listen, we have a limit of how many movies we can watch. Did you see EO?
Yes, I did see EO.
What did you think of EO?
I mean, I liked it very much. And it's also like, I wish I could have seen it again for this podcast to try to like find more of the commonalities. But like one thing it has in common with these movies is just that it's a disorienting visual experience. And also that like the donkey himself is kind of a stranger in a strange land.
Why do you think that Skolimowski wasn't able to kind of get the success that someone like Polanski did? Because he had opportunities. Like he did like a Western-ish film that starred Robert Duvall called The Light Ship, based on a famous novel.
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, some of that just has to do with luck. I mean, Polanski, Knife of the Water became the film of the Polish New Wave. And then like Rosemary's Baby became a phenomenon. Certain lucky things happen.
I'm going to say one word, genre. And that Polanski worked in genre.
It's true.
Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown. The Tenant is a little odder, but like it's still kind of working in that horror realm. And other than The Shout, Skolimowski didn't really, play in those areas, which I think makes him difficult to categorize, but he can have success at film festivals, which could perhaps get him funding for his next movie. I mean, he worked for a painter for like most of the 90s and the 2000s until he returned with Four Nights with Anna. And for the record, we did not have time to watch Essential Killing, the Vincent Gallo film.
I want to at some point. What I would like to see Skolimowski do at this point, now that he's 85, get back to boxing.
Mickey Rourke it?
Yeah.
Jump right back in
I think
there?
he can do it.
I love that he came through with EO out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And that this figure that's been around forever suddenly gets all this critical attention when if you looked at the rest of his career, you would assume it would be like, oh, look, there's another one of his films at the film festival. And then he passes away.
And then he tops it off with
The Palace.
Another screenplay for his old friend Roman.
All right. Well, let's just talk about the Patreon because we consider the journey with this filmmaker.
That's right. A little bit more Skolimowski this week. On Patreon, we talk about Roman Polanski's new film, The Palace, which is not legally available.
It played theatrically.
But that's what's on Patreon this week. Do we have any letters?
We do have letters. As per usual, you can send us letters to importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Our first letter is from Patrick, and he goes, "What do you think about the idea of pure cinema? Is it a real phenomenon that filmmakers should aspire to? Is it nostalgia for silent films? Or is it just a cliche that means my tastes are better than yours? Or something else entirely? And a topic idea for you, one-time directors. I was thinking of Charles Laughlin's The Night of the Hunter and Robert Longo's Johnny Mnemonic. That's all I got. Thank you for your work, Patrick."
So pure cinema.
We did an episode on one-time directors very early on doing this podcast because I know we did the Honeymoon Killers and I don't remember what the other one is. But, another subject that I think there's interest to revisit.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in that. Well, pure cinema, like, I know what you mean when you say it, but...
Speed Racer.
Yeah, The Palace. but an actual, like, definition of it, I'm struggling to actually come upon. Like, on Wikipedia, it puts pure cinema under non-narrative film and says is made up of a non-story, non-character films that convey abstract emotional experiences through unique cinematic devices. I know that Hitchcock used the term when he was talking to Truffaut, talking about Psycho, specifically that scene after Janet Leigh is killed, Mother Bates leaves, and then like the camera sort of drifts around the apartment, and like it eventually, you know, lands on Norman, who becomes your new protagonist. And Hitchcock said words to the effect of, that's pure cinema. That's for us directors. Like, we love it when it's not about the dialogue, it's about psychology and mood being conveyed visually. So what is pure cinema? Is it real? I mean, I like it as an expression if you're just saying that.
Yeah, I like that black and white photo of Martin Scorsese that's ironically put under post and a pure cinema.
Yeah, I like, you know, that picture where Jean-Luc Godard is holding the film?
Yeah, pure cinema.
Yeah, pure cinema is
a vibe, man.
Yeah, pure cinema is like whatever you want it to be. Is pure cinema Stan Brakhage, or is it Graydon Clark?
Or is something that moves you, that encompasses you entirely, and the mode of cinema is expanded to everything that it can be.
You know what pure cinema is to me? Pure cinema is, yeah, something that can only be conveyed in the medium of cinema using its techniques. So,
that's a great definition.
Yeah. So I think of like in Edgar G. Ulmer's The Black Cat, when the camera is like moving through Boris Karloff's, the basement of his huge mansion, and that Beethoven music is playing, dun, 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 and Karloff's voice is narrating. And there's something about the confluence of those elements.
Or in Edgar G. Ulmer's Detour, when you're on that big coffee cup, and then it pans up to the face of our protagonist, and the light falls, a transition of, you know, dark to light around his eyes, and his voiceover comes in telling you a tale of woe he's about to weave.
That's pure cinema. Or in Edgar G. Ulmer's Minstrel Man, when oh wait, no, not that one.
No,
anything
not
but that.
one.
Get that out of here.
In Edgar G. Ulmer's last film, I don't remember the title.
The Cavern.
And
when you see that cavern,
you're like, yes,
goddamn,
pure
now that's
cinema.
a cavern.
Well, thank you very much for the letter. I wonder if we could squeeze an episode about pure cinema. Like, this is pure cinema.
Yeah.
And we try to bring examples and define it, and we only talk about Edgar G.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that letter. And our next letter is from Alexander, and he goes, "Hey, Justin and Will, esteemed thinker David Lee Roth once said, the reason the critics all like Elvis Costello better than me is because they all look like Elvis Costello."
There's something to that, honestly.
If you would allow a thought experiment, change the medium from music to the movies. Which contemporary director would be David Lee Roth and Elvis Costello? Keep up the good work, Alexander Roth. Michael Bay, David Lee Roth.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. Who's a really muscular and handsome filmmaker?
Well, yeah, Michael Bay, of course.
Yeah, who I love.
And then, yeah, Michael Bay saying the reason that all the critics like Paul Thomas Anderson better than me is because they all look like Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, if he were to say that, obviously that would be a little simplistic. Nevertheless, obviously we gravitate sometimes to stories that we can identify with, that reflect our experience. Critics, you know.
Yep.
Etc.
That may share your point of view, or a point of view that you, at a certain time in your life, you are privy to.
Your class background, your gender.
Kevin Smith, if you will.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that we keep doing Kevin Smith as a subject.
Well, it's because that he was very important at a formative part in our life, and it's like an old friend you keep checking in on, and you're like, oh no, what's happening now?
And to our Patreon listeners who don't consider him a friend, I apologize.
No, you can skip that episode, or it's like going to the zoo and seeing two creatures shaking the bars, those creatures being me and Will.
Yes. But what I'll also say is, as we watch these Jerzy Skolimowski movies, or, you know, any great filmmaker, honestly, like, you know, I was just watching Ozu's An Autumn Afternoon, and like, those are universal stories.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
The story in Moonlighting, the Skolimowski movie, like, you know, that could happen today in our country, you know.
I mean, it is happening today. Yeah. No contest.
Sadly, it's not happening, but...
Yeah. Well, so our next letter is from Michael, and he goes, question on rare physical media. Hey, Justin and Will. Thanks for introducing me to the films of Michael J. Murphy, The Dragon Lives Again, Thrilling Bloody Sword, and beyond. I was wondering if either of you have a holy grail of acquired or to-be-acquired rare physical media. I've purchased some really cool DVDs and Blu-rays with rare or out-of-print sticker, and often found them listed on Amazon or eBay for a few dollars. I've yet to find a truly rare item to add to my collection, and I'm not really sure what to look for or how to find it. Thanks, Mike.
Well, there aren't that many. I feel like I have
Especially now.
Yeah, especially now. They're easier to find than ever.
Keep getting re-released.
Yes. But are there, I mean, I can definitely be victim to the aura of authenticity where like, man, I remember 10 or 15 years ago, I used to like to get the VHS tapes of the Friday the 13th movies. You know, Friday the 13th Part 4. They would have them at BMV, and you get them for $5. And I was like, in my early 20s, I would say like, yeah, this is the authentic way to watch this movie. And now you can't get those movies for anything less than like 50 because the freaks have also figured that out. So I am like victim to that mentality sometimes. And like, I don't know, if somebody showed me the original VHS copy of Tales of the Quadhead Zone, which I think is like
different. That's like thousands of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Or Things, or one of those movies. Or, you know, I was just at the Vinegar Syndrome store in town, and they had a copy of the VHS of Lucio Fulci's Zombie for $125. Big box VHS tape. You know, I wouldn't mind having that. I don't think I'd pay $120 for it.
No, like I'm not a collector in that way very much of like, I need that first thing. Because it doesn't, you know, like how book collectors can collect first editions. And like, I mean, you could hunt down like, the first Night of the Living Dead laser disc that was, I think it was Image Entertainment put it out, and they were one of the first people to make a direct deal with George Romero. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but there's also a million other copies after that. Like, it doesn't have that much value to me. As far as like out of print or rare items, when I was a teenager, I would go to stores like H&B and Music World, and I always had like a list of stuff that I was looking for. I remember for like a year, I was looking for Paul Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood. But that doesn't exist anymore because the internet is out there, and I could literally get anything if I wanted to, and I saved up for it.
But are there editions that have gone out of print that might have like certain special features on them that you would want?
Not anything that springs to mind. And oftentimes when I build something up in my head, like, oh, wow, I really want this. Like, I remember there was a South Korean DVD that had a special feature on South Korean, like, classic action cinema. When I finally got it and popped it in, I was like, this is text. It's not even a video. So, like, that's usually what it comes out to. There's not anything insightful enough that like I need it really badly. Maybe, so I was trying to think of like, what is it? What could there be? Remember South Korea put, and I've talked about this before, Old Boy out in the present, that the movie and that it has a Harry Knowles commentary track on it.
Oh wow. Well, of course you want that.
It's again kind of like, wow, I can't believe this exists. Would I pay any money for it? No, I don't think so. What interests me, I mean, you said physical media, now is just prints. That's what I want, like 60 millimeter prints of things.
Yeah, that is kind of the next level. I do love that. I have a 60 millimeter print now of the Three Stooges in orbit.
Oh, so you did get that?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
But I say that again as well, but like for me, those 60 millimeter prints, like I'm going to scan them and then I don't need them anymore. So it's not even like holding it onto it as an item that, because I'm not going to do anything with it. Like I'll give it to Will or I'll sell it again. But like sometimes I'll send me and Will, we cannot look at eBay for 60 millimeter prints because
we keep getting golden inch video ideas.
Yeah, because our tastes are too vast. And I don't say this as a compliment. I mean like, oh wow, think of what we could do with this. Will just got a print.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I don't want to say what it is though. I want to leave it in the air because
can I say I'll say that the director is not Edgar G. Elmer, but he's somebody like Edgar G. Elmer.
Yes. And like I don't think I could sell this, but like I sent it to Will and Will's like, I got it. I had to get it.
And we are going to make it available. We're going to make a scan of it available we're gonna do in some way.
Maybe I'll do like, it's just so much, but like a little Blu-ray, like I don't know.
Like a sort of limited run, like 100 copy thing.
Yeah, something like that. As long as it's like less work, because the film has value, but it's not that good.
Yes. Well, and there's another movie by the same director on eBay.
Yes.
That
but it's I would say is worse than the one that you got.
But then you also start thinking, oh, we could really fill out that package with this one.
We could, but again, the issue is that like
good.
It's not good. And I even like started watching it again to be like, maybe there's something. And it's like, nope, there's not. But like the print that you do, when we do a scan and we put it out there, that'll be the best version that will probably ever exist.
And the reason that I got it was because it needs to exist.
Yes.
Because the only version that exists
is so weird though. Like that the movie is.
The movie has for like a 3-star movie has value. You know?
Exactly. But I can't turn around and charge people 20, maybe to the really dedicated people. But if you've been with Golden Ninja Video the entire time, you'll probably go, no, I can't buy this. Or will you go, yes, here's my money. I don't know.
What if, I have an idea. What if, like, if people can prove they bought a certain number
of Golden Ninja video releases, they can get it like with their thing?
Yeah.
We'll see.
I don't know. We'll strategize this.
It may just be included on a double bill with something. Like, we'll put it out there. I mean, and there's another print that I recently got that, boy, if I put that, that's going to be wild. And I wonder how that will go. But yeah, prints. What are some like golden, like holy grail prints you wish? Detour.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm honestly thinking about this only in terms of something for Golden Ninja Video, or maybe we hold a 16 millimeter night at some point. So Ed Wood movies, obviously. If I could get, any kind of print of Glenn or Glenda, that would be great.
But that, like, none of those exist.
No, fucking Wade Williams bought them all up.
Did he buy them all up? Because it was in public domain, so I thought that they'd be everywhere.
Well, Paramount released Glenn or Glenda in the early 80s, and they collected some elements, and then Wade was like, threw some money down and was like, I'll take them. And that's why the Agfa restoration looks so bad.
Yeah.
It's probably the best one they have.
And Metropolis, that would be fun to have a print of that. You'd think there'd be a million of those, but like... One I would love to get, and when I started looking, I thought it'd be everywhere, but when asking collectors, they said, that one doesn't pop up very much. Carnival of Souls.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, that it's not out there.
Well, let's just say that if we found a print of Strangler in the Swamp, we might be able to do something with that other print.
We don't have Strangler in the Swamp, just to let people know.
But if anybody listening does, let us know.
Do you think that one got... You would think maybe Strangler in the Swamp did get shared around, because it would have been in public domain.
There would have been TV prints.
Yeah, because it was a Poverty Row film. But yeah, and the other problem is that, like, when you look for prints too, there's a lot of Western ones out there that you're like, I don't know, there's no angle on this that, like, we could do something with this.
Yeah.
But like looking at the Facebook groups, when people pass away or they're trying to sell their collection, it's like 1,000 Westerns.
Yeah.
That, like, that's what people who collect prints collect, is Westerns, basically. Other than that, I'm trying to think of, like, what else that's in the public domain that I would love to get my hands on.
Well, can I just say that Golden Ninja Video may at one point put out Plan 9 from Outer Space?
Yes.
That may happen.
That will definitely happen. Yeah. So that's exciting too. But like doing stuff with classic stuff really interests me, especially that most of the companies, because they pump out so much, they're just kind of like, oh, here's a Blu-ray and it's $50. Like Criterion has announced some stuff that you're like, hey, this is the best you guys are doing?
Oh, I thought of a Holy Grail DVD that I want.
Oh, DVD. Wow.
Yeah. So Ray Dennis Steckler, the great Los Angeles-based auteur, the man who made Rat Finka Boo Boo and The Incredibly Strange Creatures. So he ran a video store in his later years in Las Vegas, and he would, re-release all his movies on VHS. He would sell them there. He'd like make the tapes himself. He had a series of, and this is not good, but to be clear, but I want to know what this was. He had a series of like audition videos where he would like do auditions for nude models for like
Yikes.
Video for movies that he was ostensibly going to make. And he would sell like 10 volume sets of these. Any evidence of this seems to have been scrubbed from the internet. I saw them for sale on eBay once and I didn't get them. And I would like them, not because I endorse this or approve of this. It sounds like very bad behavior on Ray's part. I just want to know what it was.
So I know someone who is a huge Ray Dennis Steckler fan. I don't know if you know her, but she, after he passed away, like they were selling all of his stuff, and she bought, I think it was tapes, and she's like, there's home movie stuff on the end of this.
Wow.
Like it was like tapes that he taped over his own home movie stuff.
Oh my God.
So it's all like very personal. I wonder if she still has those.
Okay, well, we'll have to
talk about who this is. Yeah. You've probably seen her. I think she moved away, but like she did like B movie zines back in the day. I remember talking to her about this stuff, and it's like, now that is like,
that's the Holy Grail.
That's the Holy Grail. It's like the home movies of Ray Dennis Steckler. Well, thank you very much for that letter. And hey, I want to put this out there. If anybody has a big 16 millimeter collection or knows someone that has 16 millimeter and has like those public domain films, let me know, because like I don't even want to own them. Like I would just borrow them, scan them, and then send them back. Like that's all I would do. And I'd be very upfront about what I'm doing. But like there's gotta be some people out there that are willing to do that kind of stuff. Like, oh yeah, I'll make like a little bit of money on this print of Metropolis that I haven't played since in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like send it out there. So if you want to send us letters, again, it's importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. So from high art to trash, right?
That's right. Next week, I think we promised this last week,
Yes.
and I am raring to go. We are going to talk about Graydon Clark.
Now, Will's all excited about this. Then he had a moment of sobriety where he's like, oh, wait, no, then I'll have to watch these movies.
Graydon Clark was a grindhouse exploitation director. If you're a Mystery Science Theater viewer, you may have seen Final Justice with Jodan Baker or Angel's Revenge. He also made such films as Black Shampoo, Satan's Cheerleaders, one of the two Lambada movies that came out in the 90s.
Joysticks.
Oh, Joysticks with Jodan Baker. Yeah, Wacko.
And the thing about Graydon Clark is arguably not a good filmmaker.
Yeah, it's funny. You look at his filmography and you're looking for the good one.
Well,
And
The Uninvited is fun.
yeah, that's what everyone says.
Yes. There's that one. A Cat Within a Cat. It's a horror movie. George Kennedy is in it. Or as my review said, not enough though.
Wow, how prestigious.
How could they get George Kennedy? I think it's like George Kennedy, Clu Gulager.
Yeah, there are certain Graydon Clark players like Jack Palance and Martin Landau shows up in some of them, you know.
Because Graydon Clark had a Al Adamson connection, and like they loved putting old timey actors, and it just continued with him.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be doing next week. And until then, my name's Justin Glue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. As per usual, I would like to thank some of our new patrons who include Jordan Payne, Russell Hall, Arcadeus Machinia, Kyle Gustafson, Maxwell Dickinson, Ty Trillinger, Harper High, Dan Young, Noah Prescott, Brendan White, Vocational Dragon, Maria L., Patrick McNally, and William. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you. Will, what if I could tell you could watch a new Jerry Lewis movie?
Yes, please.
All right, let's just type in new Jerry Lewis film, funny 90 minutes. Boom, AI, our video generation's gonna do it for us.
Oh, no.
Yes. Have you seen like what's going around OpenAI? I think it's called Sonora.
Man, every time I see the letters AI
You're
anywhere,
like,
my eyes glaze over. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know it. I know that...
Unless it's Steven Spielberg's AI, then you're like, yes, please.
Well, yes, please. Then I'm Jonathan Rosenbaum. But yeah, like you'll see like AI created Lord of the Rings in the style of Wes Anderson.
Yes.
And it's like, no, don't show me this.
You haven't seen like they got it like next level now that they're doing like full video stuff that recreates it perfectly.
Yeah, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Get it out of my purview.
But it's going to be unavoidable. Like people are going to start using it. What do you think the future for this stuff is?
Oh man,
it's depressing.
The present is so awful. It's like you see just everywhere. Like, you know, you're scrolling. Like, have you noticed how bad Facebook is these days?
It's awful.
Where you're scrolling, it's just like all these random like pages that you don't follow. AI generated pictures of like Taylor Swift or whatever, and it's just garbage.
Even the internet's like that. That like usually the first few things you can start reading a few sentences. You're like, wait a minute, a human being did not write this.
Oh yeah, like all the websites we used to like, AV Club, all that stuff. It's
the AV Club is like a graveyard with like skeletons moving around there.
Yeah, they're
like,
doing AI articles.
When you decided to scrape the entire internet to make fake pages about every movie that ever existed, you are in trash land at that point.
But like AI is still, you know, that's what it does. It scrapes the internet. It just creates.
It can't create anything.
Yeah.
I mean, logically, if we lived in a just world, all this AI shit would be shut down immediately because it's just stealing other stuff and using those assets to make its own thing. To the point that OpenAI is like, we don't like to talk about where we take our stuff from. It's like, yeah, because you can't do that. And if people are arguing like, well, you know, a human being does that too when they're inspired. No, they're not stealing something directly. Also, human beings are not computers. That is completely different.
Well, no, I mean, AI can probably create like a 25th season episode of Law and Order, but could it make the first one?
No,
I don't think
it couldn't.
so.
Yeah,
no.
And that's the issue at the end of the day. And people go, you know, this will dominate everything. It'll make perfect images, like it's good. And
I don't want perfect images.
No, I don't want perfect images either. But you could say like old timey, and it'll recreate it perfectly. And it's like we don't want that. The argument I would like to say, or I would like to believe, is that like anybody can write. There's a million books. There's a million AI books. No one reads them because they're shit. They don't like them.
Yeah.
Like you can't. Like there is like a human cognizant, you look at something and you go, this is not right. I know it was made or based on other things.
Yeah, and I really don't think there is an organic demand for this sort of thing.
No, there isn't. It's like, oh, we don't have enough content. The only organic demand is companies go, hey, I could do this cheaper by doing it this way.
That's right. And then, there will always be a few little like blue checkmark toadies who are out there being like, whoa, look at this. We created a Picasso that's better than the real Picasso.
Yeah.
Doesn't that
But it's still based on a goddamn Picasso, you morons.
Exactly.
Like, it can't create something for itself. It can only copy other things based on your prompts.
And I believe very strongly that like art, like if your relationship to art is you want something to just like act as a pacifier and you're falling asleep to something that's familiar, then fine, maybe this could work. But if art is a sort of communication between an artist and an audience, if art is an attempt to put a finger up to the wind and see what the atmosphere of the world is, then it can't do that.
Yeah, but it's not going to go away. That's the thing. Like, as it gets better and better. So I'm curious to like, what is the end point? Like, where does it get used? You can say like, well, an artist has a perspective. AI art will never have that, even if it's creating full motion videos.
I mean, like, let's just say it is possible that, there's a whole, you go on Tubi, you check network TV, like all the young Sheldons of the world, does that become AI at some point?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I couldn't say one way or the other. Definitely, if you go on Tubi, it's funny, on Michael and Us, we've done, and Luke has made me stop picking these movies, but sometimes I'm very tickled by these political documentaries
that exist only on Tubi
and that are obviously AI generated.
Wow.
And they're very much like, it'll be called like Trump the first year, and then you start watching it, there'll be a narrator that's like, Donald Trump was born in 1940 and many criticize, like they're like Wikipedia articles on film, and then there'll just be random stock footage. And I find those movies like very unsettling and strange and fascinating because they're like that evil.
That you're willing to just put out this garbage into the world. And
and then I think about like, who's watching this? Like,
people, like, they're clicking on it. They
then all that matters is the click. And then eventually, like, maybe some of those movies that are like David Dakota maybe will be out of work because the sort of movies that he makes, Yeah,
but we like them because they're David Dakota films.
And because they have the human touch.
Yes.
And
like, I'm sure the AI bros would be like, well, we can recreate the human touch basing them on the David Dakota film. Man. It's like, it's not the same though. Like we're just going to be, it's going to be a classic Itchy and Scratchy is nice now. We don't want to watch. Everybody goes out like rubbing their eyes. It's like, oh, wow, the real world. It's out there. I don't know what is that point where you get there. Like, because like, there's so much information. If anybody can do whatever they want, they're going to get tired very fast by the things that they can make. Of like Jerry Lewis, I don't know, starring with Jackie Chan in something.
Ooh, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. No, thank you. But the wild thing about AI is that like how well it can do like visual effects stuff too, which is like the companies are going to start using that to do their movies, and then people will be like, well, yeah, I don't need this.
Man, I saw Argyle this week. Have you seen it?
No, I'm not going to see Argyle.
Man, the special effects in that one. Holy shit.
Matthew Vaughn is a director after Layer Cake. Each one of his movies, I've gone, I don't like these movies. They don't work for me.
Did you like Kick-Ass when it came out?
I thought it was okay. It just, all of his movies, they feel off, and they've only been getting more off as he's been going along.
Argyle really feels AI generated.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That, like, the backgrounds, everything.
Oh my God.
So wait, did you do that on an episode of Michael and Us?
No, I did it for Valentine's Day because we wanted to go see a movie, and we didn't want to, like,
Madam Web.
We're not going to see Zone of Interest on Valentine's Day, and it's like, well, okay, it's Argyle or it's the Sydney Sweeney romantic comedy, and that's only in VIP. So let's go see,
Argyle. We're gonna laugh. It'll be 2 hours and change of our lives. We'll never get back.
Yeah, what are we gonna do? Stay home and enjoy each other's company?
I mean, that's another sign that the movie theater's like, why don't you have more romantic movies out on Valentine's Day? Because people are going out and they're seeing. I do like that Argyle says from the twisted mind of Matthew Vaughn, as people are like, we love Matthew Vaughn more.
Yeah, here, give me that mind. I'll untwist it. Whoops! Looks like I broke it.
I mean, Matthew Vaughn used to be Guy Ritchie's producer. Like all those early films, all Matthew Vaughn and Guy Ritchie, most famously doing the most boring commentary of all time on Snatch.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like Argyle has a lot of scenes in it that really do feel like this is like if you put Guy Ritchie through the AI machine.
Oh, yikes.